Two guys in their early 50s with one dream: to achieve middle-aged sporting glory. This is the Missing Links Golf Show. Andy Walker, welcome back for this very special Ryder Cup edition of the Missing Links Golf Show. Great to see you, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, buddy. What a weekend it was.
Oh,
Well done to the European team. It's now, and I wouldn't say they're dominating, but I saw went back through the results. There was something on social media that was posted, and since 1985, I think it was, that there's been 20 Ryder Cups, and Europeans have won now 14. So 70% success rate since the mid 80s for the Europeans. I mean, the Americans dominated through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Obviously, there's the Jack and Arnold and Tom Watson and all those greats those years. But yeah, in the last sort of 30 years, or actually now 40 years, it's been very much the Europeans that have taken the cake on most occasions.
that is an interesting stat. And I think what you're talking about as well there is the period where it shifted from the US versus Great Britain and Ireland to inclusion of continental Europe, which
Mm,
obviously gives the Europeans a larger pool of players to select from. Still,
yes.
I would imagine a much smaller pool of players than what the US has got to pick from. But
Yes.
nevertheless, it's definitely leveled the playing field. But that surprises me. I mean, I think I kind of have always looked at the Ryder Cup as being one of those things where the home team wins,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
And
really
traditionally
hard to
that's
win
been the
away.
case. Yeah.
Mm. And so that was very interesting to see in this edition. Obviously, an away team victory, which is one of the points that I do want to talk about in this is that perception of home ground advantage, and
Mm,
does that
mm.
exist on either side of the pond to an equal
Yep.
measure? But we've got a lot to get through in today, and interestingly, we're going to talk a lot about golf, not
Mm.
necessarily about golf.
Yeah, look, and at the end of the day, the result was the result. I think that the scoring was absolutely phenomenal, especially in the four ball and the foursomes. I mean, I was listening to the live after the Ryder Cup a couple of times,
Mm,
and Brandel Chambly was going through some of the stats after day two, and so on day one, Europe was 16 under in the foursomes, which in foursomes
it's
is just
insane.
unbelievably good. Day two, the Americans were 16 under in the foursomes. It's just that the Europeans were 21 under
That's
in the
insane.
foursomes. Then in the four ball in the afternoon, the US was 31 under,
Mm.
but the Europeans were 34 under. And you just sit there and you go, that is just unbelievably good golf in those conditions.
Look, it is, but it also does ask the question: did Bethpage Black actually bear its teeth at all over the weekend? It
Mm.
seemed to be set up pretty benignly for a
Yeah,
competition like this.
yeah, and look, they got good
Definitely
weather.
nothing. Yeah, and definitely nothing like what you might see the setup at a US Open or something like
No,
that.
no. I mean, there were soft greens. There was, and they were slow greens as well, which probably suited the Europeans a bit better.
For sure.
And yeah, certainly it was ripe for the picking. Interestingly, though, I think it was, even though the commentary was all over after day two, I think it was
It wasn't.
closer than what the commentators were talking about, because the Europeans hold a lot of putts on the
Mm.
first 2 days, and that was probably the difference. There wasn't a huge amount, I don't think, in ball striking. It's just that Europe sunk the putts that mattered. In day three, again, in the results, the US won, and if you look at the score, the US won convincingly. But eight out of the 11 matches that were played, obviously Victor Hovland and Harris English didn't play, and that was tied. But out of the 11 matches that were played, eight went down 18, and
Yeah,
five finished in a tie.
yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah,
That is unbelievably close.
yeah.
So I think that while there seemed to be a disparity in the scores, like the winning who won day one and day two, and then obviously the reverse in day three. I think it was a lot closer than what those results suggest.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's true. But it also just sort of says a little bit about certain players' ability to get it done in the big moment when it counts.
Mm,
Like and you can, and to that point, I think one of the lasting memories I'm going to have is watching the 18th green with Russell Henley leaving his putt an inch short,
mm,
and then Shane Lowry, dropping his
yep.
after getting a great read off Henley's putt, but
Mm,
dropping
mm,
his to secure the half point to actually, get them over the line at 14
mm,
points to retain the cup. Like that was a moment I think
mm, mm.
that will be remembered without a doubt.
Yeah. But you also, before that, you see in the first two matches of the singles. I mean, Cameron Young sunk a really good putt from just off the back of the green to win his match, and then Justin Thomas sunk. It was the opposite side of the hole, sunk a great putt to win his match against Tommy Fleetwood. So you've got these big time players, and I think this is golf as well. Is that those putts weren't going in on day one and day two for the Americans, whereas they were for the Europeans. And it's
That's
just
right.
flipped over during the
Mm.
singles. And that's how close it can be.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of big match players, Scotty Scheffler's performance, fair to say,
Yeah,
underwhelming.
I think he would be disappointed with his performance, but in saying that, I don't think he let the team down and performed badly. I just think that and in golf, you lose more often than you're not. Even the best players in the world. I think Jack Nicklaus said at one point he loses 80% of the time, right? So when the greatest golfer of all time still loses 80% of the time, there's going to be, especially when you're playing the best in the world, the best in the world versus the best in the world, it doesn't take much. You can be just off your game, and the putts just may not go in for the first couple of days, and you lose all your matches at that level,
Mm.
right? Whereas, on the last day when he was playing Rory, he did hold a lot more putts and played a lot more like he has been throughout 2025, and ended up winning. Mind you, only just one up, but he still won his match.
I think there was a stat that I read. It was something like he played, and the numbers might be slightly wrong, but they won't be far off. He played something like 65 holes of golf over the weekend, and his opponent, collectively, his opponents made 32 birdies on those 65
Yeah,
holes of golf. It was
yeah,
something insane
yeah,
like that he was up
yeah,
against. So
yeah,
I think you're right. It wasn't a case of Scotty necessarily playing that badly, although he has copped a bit of criticism for his performances in the media since the event, because there were obviously expectations that he would walk away with 4 points, but
yeah.
that wasn't necessarily the way that it panned out. But there are look, there's a few things that I do want to talk about. You've touched on it a little bit, and one of those is the perception of the home ground
Mm,
advantage.
yep.
So we talked a bit about the fact that the Ryder Cup seemingly has been bouncing back with home team, home team, home team. Obviously, this is an away win for the Europeans. I have heard some talk that there is less of a home ground advantage for the US than there is for Europe. And this is based around the fact that so many of the European players have experience playing on the PGA Tour, um, or have had college careers in the US, or even live in America now. And
Mm,
so it's almost like a pseudo home game for them. Whereas when the Americans go over to Europe, it's very foreign because they don't tend to travel that much and play that much golf outside of
mm,
America.
mm, mm.
Thoughts?
To a certain extent, I agree with that. I think that if you look at there's two aspects to the home ground advantage on a golf course. So you look at, say you look at a footy field, right? Whether it be rugby league, rugby union, NFL, you could even look at like baseball or cricket. You're playing on a ground, right? And probably less so with cricket because you can prepare the pitch in a certain way. But if you're certainly the footy codes, it's the same dimensions. It's the same sort of ground. You've got the same post. They're the same width, right? The difference is your home ground advantage lies in the crowd, right? That's generally speaking
Yeah.
where the home ground advantage is in that you've got the crowd on your side and you've got that energy on your side. I think in with the US, I think that the conditions of the US, the Europeans are so used to playing the conditions of the US that it negates the advantage of the golf course. So the actual playing field advantage. You've still got the home fan advantage though with and we saw that, and we'll talk about fan behavior and how the crowd was a little bit later, but you've certainly got, I think, the home crowd advantage with the Ryder Cup with the US. When you go to Europe, because the US players are not as familiar with playing European courses as what obviously the Europeans are, and certainly they're not as familiar as what the Europeans, with the Europeans playing the American courses. I think the Europeans not only have a home ground advantage with the conditions and the golf course, they've also got the home fan advantage. So I think there is an advantage, but I think the Europeans have a bigger advantage playing when they're playing in Europe than what the US have playing in the USA.
And I agree with all of that. I think the other thing which goes into it as well is preparation, and how much prep was done prior to the tournament. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of how many times each of the teams played the course on its setup, but I would imagine that looking at how detailed Luke Donald's approach was to preparing his group for this
Mm,
contest,
yeah.
it would surprise me if he left any stone unturned moving into the competition at Bethpage Black, and whether that was however many practice rounds that they got out there for versus the Americans, who may have potentially just taken the approach that they know the course well because they played it regularly,
Mm,
and
mm,
maybe didn't prepare quite as thoroughly as what the Europeans did. But
mm,
it certainly appeared from the outside looking in that the European team got a bit of a jump on the opposition over the
mm.
over the starting few rounds at least. So
Yeah,
that to me would
yeah.
indicate a better prep.
Yeah, and certainly preparation, you heard and Rory talked about it, and I heard Paul McGinley talk about it as well, because Paul McGinley's an advisor to
Yeah.
the European Ryder Cup squad. And they started preparing pretty much straight after Rome. It was a long preparation for them. They made some very deliberate decisions. One of them being Luke Donald remaining as captain, and the consistency of the captaincy, especially for an away Ryder Cup. The second thing is they looked at the data and the stats, and they made the decision to put experienced players in where possible. Obviously, there's a qualifying, a certain criteria where you can't leave out the first six, isn't it? That you
Yep. Yep. Six
that you
automatics and then
yeah,
six
six
captain's
automatics.
picks. Yep.
So that's where I think Nicholas Højgaard got he was an automatic qualification into the team, I think. So he
I
was
think you
the
find it
only.
might have been his brother Rasmus.
Oh, was it? Okay. They're twins. They can interchange. So they that qualification. So that he was the only debutant in the
Yeah.
European
Yeah.
team, and the rest brought experience into that away game for Europe, and that was a very deliberate decision
Mm.
with the management of the European team. And we heard Rory and then Paul McGinley talk about the VR headsets that they were using to practice and to simulate the conditions that they would experience with the crowd against them, and to put themselves in that position. So they've already pre had experience in those conditions coming into the event. So yeah, I think preparation for the Europeans was dramatically different to what it has been in prior Ryder Cups.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And, conversely, on the other side of the pond, and you were looking at how settled the European approach was in the lead up to things, there didn't seem to be much controversy in who was being picked in the team. There certainly was no controversy around the captaincy. It was a very considered and very planned campaign.
Mm,
versus you look at the US preparation, and it seemed, again from the outside looking in, that the lead story the whole time in 6 months leading up to the Ryder Cup was, will Keegan play or will
mm,
Keegan not play? Now,
yep.
obviously, he made the decision to focus on the captaincy rather than being a playing member of the team. And I suppose there's a question to be asked: was that the right decision? Would
Mm.
America have been better with somebody else stepping into the captaincy role and Keegan actually filling one of the 12 spots playing on the team?
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, we're never going to know the answer to that question, but I think, you could certainly argue that he was easily one of the 12 best golfers that the US could put on the paddock.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Changing captains at that point, you've then got to sort of go back to the drawing board and relook at strategy and all the rest. So yeah, I think Keegan made a selfless decision to not play himself because he thought he was doing the right thing in focusing on the captaincy, so that he then was able to give another player the best chance that they can of just purely focusing on playing and winning. So yeah, it's we're never going to go back and know what the result was, in different circumstances. But I certainly think that Keegan did the right thing and did the selfless thing in not picking himself. So I think that was the right decision given the circumstances that he found himself in.
Yeah, I think I would just say one thing further on that, and that is that I think USGA for 4 years now has put Keegan in an impossible situation. I mean, I
Mm,
think I think you could easily argue that he should have been picked to play in the 12 at Marco Simone. When Zach Johnson obviously went in a different direction.
mm,
And then it felt almost like an apology to give him the captaincy at the next Ryder Cup to,
mm,
in some way make up for that omission. But
mm.
unfortunately, what that did is it's basically ruled him out of playing in another
Yeah,
Ryder Cup when he
yeah,
was absolutely at the top of his game. So
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
just think history is going to look back on the Ryder Cup career of Keegan Bradley, sorry, and view him as one of the most unfortunate participants that's just
mm,
been stymied by his own golf association.
yeah, yeah. And I'm not going to disagree with that because yeah, that's some very valid points. And uh, look, I see Zach Johnson's decision to go with Justin Thomas for Rome rather than Keegan Bradley. I can see both sides of that coin because Justin Thomas is the heart and soul of that US team. He brings so
No
much
question.
energy, emotion, passion to the team that it's hard to ignore. It's hard to leave him out of that team. So do you go with that passion, that energy, that heart, bringing the team together so that it functions as a team, or do you go, specifically on who's played the best? There's an argument both ways, and again,
Absolutely.
it's an incredibly difficult decision. And Zach Johnson, I think, made the best decision that he thought he was making at the time.
Oh, I mean, look, he's the guy in the chair. He's got to make the call,
Mm,
and it's very easy. You know this from being in business and managing teams. It's
mm,
very easy to look at the leader and to say, well, I don't agree with that decision.
mm.
And it's very different to be the person that sits in the chair that has to actually make the decision and
Yeah,
stand behind it.
yeah,
Zach Johnson was in that situation. He made a decision. He will no doubt stand behind it. And I would support that because you got to make the call, right or wrong,
yeah.
and you stand by it.
Mm,
In this situation, Keegan obviously has made, and I agree with you, the selfless decision, probably the right decision, but I just think it was a decision that he should never have had to have made
yeah, yeah.
because he probably should not have been appointed captain in the first place because
Mm,
of his position as a player within the
yeah.
US system.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so,
and I think you're right there because if someone else had have taken, and I listened to the interview after the Ryder Cup was finished with Keegan Bradley, and he said that the Ryder Cup's been full of heartbreak for him, but he still loves the event, and whether he'll get another chance to be a part of the Ryder Cup, he said he doesn't know, but he said he'll always love the event and be always grateful for the opportunity that it creates. And whether that would have been the case if he hadn't been captain, if he had have been a player and potentially made a difference in the result, to then go and become a player, say in 6, 8, 10 years time, when in a different circumstance, when he's not playing as well as what he is now, then this may not have been sort of the last hurrah and the legacy that Keegan Bradley leaves for for himself.
Definitely. Um, there's nothing to say that he couldn't still qualify as a player in 2 years' time.
Oh
And I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
anyone that's a fan of golf would probably love to see him get the opportunity to play in another Ryder Cup and
Mm,
potentially, to be the guy that sinks the putt on 18 to win it for the US. I think like that would just wrap the whole story up full circle
mm.
for
Yep.
someone like Keegan, and the amount of emotion that would come out at that point would be pretty amazing to watch.
Yeah.
So,
And
you
look,
know,
if
sport
you're, because
doesn't
I
work in fairy tales, so unfortunately. So,
no, it doesn't. But you listen to like what some of the US team had to say. Oh, Scotty Scheffler, there was a really good interview with him as well at the end, where they talked about the team environment, and it seems that Keegan Bradley had created a really strong team culture within the US. They all, seem to feel as though this team, the energy and the feeling and the bond within the team was incredible. Even though they didn't get the result in the end, they all said, "I love being around these guys. I love being a part of this team." So he's created a team which seems to be really good, but whether this was the best time for him to be captain, yeah, I think that's up for some pretty serious debate.
yeah. I do want to talk about team culture though, because it is a really, really good point. And I think from the leadership perspective, you're looking at two strong leaders like Keegan. By every story that we've heard, as you say, did a great job of bringing that group of people together. I think Luke Donald did an incredible job over 4 years.
Mm,
When he stepped in late before the previous Ryder Cup and took over
yep.
and got the result in Italy. And then, obviously the work that he's done for this one. And I think as well, the speech that he made at the opening ceremony, there were a few digs at the US team in that speech, but
Mm,
by the same token, nothing was disrespectful. And it really was the kind of rousing call to arms pre-match address that you would want to hear from a
mm,
sporting team leader. I just think leadership is as much about communication as it is about any other skill. And
yep.
I think that Luke Donald has the ability to communicate very strongly a
Mm,
purpose and an idea and something for people to get behind. But to that point, the counterpoint on that, and has been talked about a lot, and I'm interested in your thoughts, is the decision for payment to be given to the American players. So obviously, this was a decision deliberately to not happen within the European team.
mm.
Um, is it as big a deal as what was talked about? Is it right? Is it wrong? Does it accurately reflect the effort and everything that goes into performing in a Ryder Cup, or is it a distraction? There's so many questions on this, Andy Walker.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I mean, there is a money making exercise within the Ryder Cup. I mean, when you look at what the Ryder Cup generates, there's a lot of
That is
money
true.
there. There's a lot of money there. So, do the players feel as though they're entitled to a part of that? Obviously, the US players believe that they are, because they're effectively creating a lot of the content, that they are entitled to part of that, distribution of funds, and that's a fair point. I don't disagree with that point to that end. But I listened to Paul McGinley talk about the culture and the approach that the Europeans took. And they had the discussion around payment. And it was a very deliberate decision to not get paid by the Europeans. And the reason why they didn't, they chose not to get paid is because they wanted to respect the traditions. They wanted to respect the players that have come before them, and the fact that they hadn't been paid. And they wanted to go out and purely be representing their continent, their families, their friends, the players that have come before them, the traditions, the culture within the Ryder Cup, and what it means for Europe. So they wanted their focus to be purely on that, uh, competing and representing Europe and everything that that means. So does that then bring a different level of emotion into the game? I mean, look, I've never been in that position, so I can't, I can't give a informed viewpoint. I can see both sides. I can definitely see both sides, and maybe, with getting paid for it, the players can say, okay, well, yes, we want a certain cut of the proceeds or the distribution from the Ryder Cup, and then rather than keeping it for themselves, they do something like at a grassroots level for golf. Or I know that Paul McGinney talked about there is a pension for certain criteria after you've finished on the PGA Tour. If you've played for a certain number of years, there's a certain criteria where the PGA Tour will give you a pension. There's not that in the previously the European Tour, what's now the DP World Tour, and apparently there's a number of previous Ryder Cup representatives playing on the senior tour within Europe that are, I mean, they're not on the breadline, but they're still living a, quite a, you know, uh, normal. They're not living in an extravagant lifestyle. They're just sort of making their way in the world. So whether they take that distribution to help in that respect, previous representatives that potentially need help, or as I said, have assist grassroots golf within Europe. I don't know. But actually getting paid and putting in your own bank account, yeah, I must admit I don't necessarily agree with that.
Interesting points. My understanding is the vast majority, if not all, of the American team donated their payments to charities of their choice.
Okay. Yep, that's good.
Um, to that point that you talk about whether or not that's plunging it back into grassroots level of golf, or whether it's
Mm,
supporting other children's charities and other charities. So I think what I don't understand on this topic is, where did the push come from to pay the players?
mm,
Because you would think that if it was from the players themselves, that they would have been pocketing money. But if they're then turning it around and donating it to charity, either there's been a change of heart because of you know fan opinions and society blowback or anything like that. But I
yep,
don't really
yep,
think
yep.
that's the point. Um, or has it come from somewhere else? I do think the point that you make about how much money the Ryder Cup generates, and the fact that the people that create the product weren't getting a cut of it, I think that's a
Mm,
really valid point.
yep,
Um,
yep.
and there's a lot of other people that are actually taking some pretty fat salaries and getting a lot of benefit off the efforts that those
Yes.
24 players on the course are putting in.
Mm,
So I do think that's an interesting point. Um, the other thing, though, is I want to draw a parallel randomly to the State of Origin Rugby League in Australia.
yep.
Okay. And we hear every year, for any of the Aussies that are listening to this, you'll know what I'm talking about. You hear every year, oh, New South Wales don't get Origin. When you pull on the
Mm,
Queensland jersey, you grow an extra leg, and you can do all these amazing things that you can't do in clubland. And you're just a different player when you pull on the jersey because it means so much. Okay, I buy only half of that. I'm a New South Wales supporter,
yep, yep,
but the
yep.
fact is, the results don't lie, and the number of times that the Queenslanders come over the top of the New South Wales team in Game
Mm,
3 just like breaks your heart every year.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
something to it, right? Like there's this moral superiority about, we get the passion and the meaning and the effort and the
Mm,
extra 1% and all this better than the
yep.
other team. I kind of feel like in this instance, Europe used this to their advantage. It was a
Mm,
rallying cry.
yep.
We're in it for the passion, we're in it for the meaning, you're in it for the money. Now, whether that's true is kind of not the point, because they used it for their advantage
Mm,
as a cry to get behind, to essentially go, the USA don't get Ryder Cup, we get Ryder Cup, we're in
mm,
it for the
mm,
right reasons, and this
mm.
gives us a little bit of a psychological advantage.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think it's less about the impact it had on the US team and more about what it was able to provide as a motivating factor for the
Mm.
Europeans. Is kind
Yeah,
of where I'm
yeah,
going.
and there's and you talk about the comparisons between the Europeans and the Queenslanders. The Queenslanders, they love to get the underdog tag.
Yeah,
Every
yeah.
year they're vying for the underdog tag. I mean, even when they had Jonathan
All of the
Thurston
Australian
and
teams.
yeah, they're still going. Oh yeah, we're the underdogs. Like they
Yeah,
love that tag, and that's what Europe seem
yeah,
to do every year in the Ryder Cup. They're always the underdogs. So whether and you're right, that rallying call and that emotion
yeah,
of we need to we need to go over and above what we normally do. And yeah, I definitely think there's something to that. It's something that I don't think that you can put a finger on or
mm,
isolate, but there is definitely something to that emotion and rising to the occasion because yeah, it's something that means so much to you.
yeah. So, speaking of state of origin comparisons,
Mhm.
I think that's a segue for the ages. Far out.
I know exactly where you're going with it too.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that this this version of the Ryder Cup, we saw a football crowd.
Yeah.
Um, we didn't see a golf crowd.
Yep.
You know, there's been a lot of talk about it. There was a lot of talk about it during the tournament. Did the crowd go too far? Is this the sort of thing that we want to be seeing at golf tournaments, or is this the sort of thing that is a black eye on the game? Um, I know you've got some pretty strong views on this, and to be
Mm,
perfectly honest, so do I.
mm.
But yeah, I just want to throw that one out there. And what do you think? The crowd was is that what you want as a home ground advantage? Is that a partisan crowd, or is that just a football crowd that's watching the wrong sport?
Yeah, it's a football crowd that's watching the wrong sport. I'm all for passionately backing your team, right?
Hmm.
But you need to be respectful. You need to be respectful of the opposition. And at the end of the day, this is sport. We're talking about sport. We're not talking about a life or death situation. You're not talking about something that's going to have a dramatic, I mean, it has a dramatic impact in the lives of the players and those people around them. But as a fan, we go there for entertainment, right? Or we watch on TV for entertainment. And yeah, as I said, I'm all for passionately supporting your team. However, I don't like intentionally trying to put someone off when they're either in golf playing a shot or trying to perform. And B, I don't like the personalized, abusive, offensive attacks that go on. That's just not what golf is about. I'm a bit of a traditionalist, a bit old school. I just don't like it. I don't like, and you see it coming into the game. Talking about the Wasted Management Open, which goes on in
Yep.
Phoenix each year. You look at live golf. I see live golf in a lot of ways that it brings that same crowd into the game. I've mentioned on the show previously, I went to the Australian Open last year, and they do have a party type hole at the Australian Open. And there were blokes there who'd had way too much to drink, and that was when, and they've changed the format now, but the girls were playing with the boys. It was alternate, a group of
Yeah,
girls and a
yeah,
group
yeah,
of boys.
yeah, yeah.
And on the 15th of at the Australian, I was watching Minjee Lee putt, and there was a comment from the crowd, and I'm not going to repeat what it is and what was said, but it was disgraceful, right? And I was embarrassed as a bloke. I was embarrassed that someone had said that to Minjie, and she you could tell like she heard it, but then as graceful as ever, she smiled, walked off the back of the green into the next tee, didn't react to it. I don't want to see that in golf. That's football. That's not golf. That's not where I want golf to go. And I understand that the people who are managing the game want to bring more people to golf. But if
Mm.
you're bringing that to golf, you're going to push away so many more people and so many and golf will stop being an inclusive game. It will be a game where the people that go and watch it are there to party, there to drink, there to yell abuse, there to, just carry on like morons. And I just I don't want to see that. I don't want to see golf go down that path. Go and watch the footy. If that's what you want to do, go and watch the footy. But I would prefer to see a more inclusive crowd come into golf and be involved in golf. And that's both, both sexes, all types of backgrounds, all types of beliefs coming together and being inclusive and supporting each other in the game of golf. And I just don't see that type of behavior as being aligned to, what I would like to see happen in the game of golf moving forward.
Now, well said, Andy Walker. I couldn't agree more. I do want to draw another parallel to another sport. So, sort of harking back to cricket playing days, and anyone that's played that great sport will know that there's a lot of time between balls. It's a very mental sport in the same
Mm,
way that golf is. I haven't played much or any baseball in my time, but I would imagine that there's potential that there's some similarities to baseball as well in this because
mm,
you have got in the same way that you've got the deliveries in cricket, you've got the pitches in baseball. So there's time for people to have a bit of a chat with the batter and get inside their head and some of those sorts of things. But this much I will say, whilst a fast bowler in cricket might, bowl one at your head and then come running down and spit fire at you afterwards. The slip's cordon and the fielders in close might have a bit of a word, and the wicket keeper's always going to have a bit of a chirp in your ear.
mm,
There's two things that should never happen and really do get stamped out very quickly. One of those is an attempt to distract whilst you're then focused on the next delivery. So there can't be chat and talk as the bowler's running in. And the other thing is that sledging or gamesmanship or chirping or whatever you want to call it needs to remain in the realms of related to the game, not not delve into personal abuse, not delve into threats, and certainly not delve into things like comments about wives, girlfriends, mothers,
mm.
or any of those sorts of things.
Yep.
And when it crosses that line, that's when it's not acceptable, and that's when the
Mm,
umpire should be stepping in and doing something about it. And I
yep.
think I think what we saw at Bethpage was too much crossing the line. We saw a lot of commentary about players, wives, girlfriends, partners, family situations. We saw outright abuse. We saw attempts to distract over the ball.
Mm,
And this is where, for me, it crosses the line.
yep.
Where sports at its best is where there's a passionate crowd that's obviously behind one side,
Mm, mm,
and where any of those remarks that get made are, witty, funny, um, interesting, but just not outright abuse, like the
mm.
FUs and all those
No,
sorts of things. Like that,
terrible.
it takes
Yep.
zero intellect
Mm,
to throw an F bomb at a player.
yep.
And I don't think that's what we need in the game. I don't think that it
Mm,
brings anything. And it certainly doesn't create a family atmosphere. It doesn't create an atmosphere, to your point, where I would take my wife or my kids.
mm,
And that's what I would want to be able to do. It should
yep.
be fun. It should be a celebration of the sport. It should not be feeling like you're in a car park outside the local pub and you're
Yep.
about to get into a brawl. And I think, unfortunately, happy to say this and go on record, I genuinely feel that the American crowd let itself down
Mm,
during
yep.
the event. And as an outsider looking in, it was ugly and it was not a good advertisement. And it certainly
Mm.
wasn't the sort of thing that would make me want to pack my bags and go on a holiday to the US.
No, 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 and certainly I wouldn't want to. I mean, I would love to watch a Ryder Cup. I mean, I'm not European, obviously, or American. Probably President's Cup is
Be
something
nice to
that
be a bit more competitive though in President's
yeah.
Cup.
Well, and I'll come back to another point a little bit later. Remind me, but yeah, I wouldn't want to take my kids to an event like that and witness behavior like that.
No, no,
I
no.
just, I would love to have my kids with me and my wife with me and to be able to experience golf in the way that I love golf and for them to see what I love about golf, but not to be in that environment. I wouldn't feel comfortable or really. I mean, I would feel safe myself, but I wouldn't feel my kids' viewpoint of the world and mental viewpoint would be safe, and that's just not not where I'd want to go.
Yeah. Now the counterpoint to this, which is an interesting one, is Rory. So a couple of things happened with Rory. Firstly, there was the controversy about the drink that was allegedly thrown at his wife Erica's hat.
Mm,
Um, Interestingly, though, I did see some footage from a different angle that got released a couple of days afterwards, which seems to indicate that it wasn't thrown, that it was actually smacked out of somebody's hand by accident
right.
and happened to go in her direction. So if that's the case, then I think that's just an accident, and
Mm,
an apology is given, and we move on with our lives. But
yeah.
the point that I want to make is Rory was very vocal about how much he didn't appreciate a lot of the f bombs and a lot of the
Mm,
distractions and a lot of the stepping over
mm.
the line from the crowd. Yet, wise commentator on the game, Paul Azinger, um,
Yep.
don't criticise the source. Um, Rightly, I think in this case, pointed out that Rory was very happy to flip the bird and fu back to the crowd on any number of occasions, and
Mm.
you can't have it both ways. Either we don't have this in golf, at which point you don't engage in it yourself, and then you've got the high ground to make the criticisms, or if you do engage in it yourself, then don't complain about it.
Yeah, yeah, and look, as much as I don't want to agree with Paul Azinger in this matter, and I've disliked Paul Azinger ever since he held that bunker shot in the US to win the USPGA against Greg Norman.
Yeah,
Was it 1988? I think it was.
might have been.
I've always had something against Paul Azinger, but look, all jokes aside, I agree with what Paul Azinger said because I don't think you can have a crack at someone for that sort of language and that sort of behavior and then turn around and say exactly the same thing back to them. I get
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
reaction, and it's a reaction to that happening to you. But if you then turn around and indulge in the same behavior straight back, then you're just at that level, right?
mm,
I,
mm,
I'm all for if the crowd gives you a bit of hurry up, and you then perform whole apart or whatever, turning around and beating your chest or fist pumping in the direction of the crowd to say, there you go, you didn't affect me. Not to yell abuse at them, but to, or even just go, come on. I remember Leighton
yeah,
Hewitt used to, the big
yeah,
come on. Um, I'm all for that. That's the back and forth that I think is really good in that home ground away ground behavior. However, the personal attacks specifically to one person unacceptable, but then that person turning around and giving an equal personal attack
yeah.
or offensive attack back unacceptable as well. So I agree with Paul Azinger in what he said about McIlroy's behaviour. Yes.
Mm, mm. Oh, look, I think we've picked Rory on quite a few episodes over the last 12 months, to be honest. But I think on this
Mm,
one, we do agree. Obviously that was a reaction which was born out of a lot of frustration and a lot of annoyance and a lot of other emotions that was going on during the contest. But I completely agree that
mm,
if you're going to say that a certain type of behaviour is unacceptable, you can't then go and engage in it in retaliation and still maintain the moral high ground because
yeah.
you're basically just saying, well, I'm doing the same thing. So
Mm,
it is what it
yep.
is. I think had he turned around and like you say, big fist pump, chest beat, even blow them a kiss, I think would have been
Mm.
fantastic
Well,
after.
he did that at the start
Yeah,
in I think
yeah,
the start of day two. That's what he did to the crowd,
mm,
and that's all well and good. That's part of the
yeah,
the back and forth between. the participants and the crowd. And again, I'm all for, the USA chant. I'm all for that. I'm all for, loudly cheering when your team performs, or when they win. You look at what the European fans, some of the songs and what they were saying. It was really, I saw there was one, I think it might have been after day two, where they all sort of took their shoe off and singing along the lines of, take your shoe off if you're five up. And like, it was that sort of stuff. It's not personal
Yeah, yeah,
attacks to
yeah,
the
yeah,
players,
yeah.
but it's celebrating the fact that your team has performed, and it's that back and forth between you and the opposition. I love that stuff. That's what it's all about. The personal offensive attacks. No, sorry, that's not cool.
What are your thoughts on the European team then singing a bit of a song on the plane? I think it was, and trolling the US president with a bit of "Are you watching? Are you watching Donald Trump?"
Look, I think that was in good fun and good spirits, and
Yeah.
Donald Trump did reply to it saying, "Yes, I'm watching," and well done. So,
Congratulations.
yeah,
And
so
that and that was great. I thought
yeah.
that was fantastic, and hats off to him for that response as well. I thought that was
Again,
fantastic.
it's not a personal attack on against the
Yeah,
US president. It's a bit of banter, a bit of fun,
yeah,
and I'm all for banter and fun, and taking the Mickey out of it. I mean, we do it on the show. Like, it's
yeah.
not that's part of being human and not taking yourself too seriously. So all for that. When it becomes personal and bitter and offensive, yeah, different story.
I mean, we talked about Keegan maybe should have been playing in the 12. DJT, what do you think? Number 47, should he have been playing in the 12? Would America have got a different result if they'd picked him?
Uh, yeah. I don't know. He attended day one, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He
So
did.
yeah, he
And
did.
an alleged
I
cost
know,
of something like $16 million to
yeah.
the taxpayers. Yeah,
Well, I mean, at least there wasn't a delay in the start of the matches as there was in the US Open tennis.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
look, again, I'm all for the leaders of and government leaders of our country, and supporting their team. No problem with that at all. Attending the game, or attending the event, I have no issue with that at all. It actually then it brings a more human element to those people in power that sometimes you think, they're not, you don't necessarily see them as humans. You just see them as, the president, or in Australia, the prime minister, or whoever.
Mm, mm. No, well, I think, yeah, absolutely, they should be turning up for sure. Anyhow, well, speaking of team lineups, there is one other controversy that I do want to ask you about, and get your take on it. And there was a lot spoken of this. I don't think before the tournament started. Tournament the right word? Competition,
Event.
event, before the event started. I don't think anyone had been really actively talking about or thinking about this infamous envelope rule,
Mm, mm,
which seems to have gained a lot of publicity. And for those that have been living under a rock over the last weekend, the envelope rule is that before the event starts, so prior to the first pairs rounds on day one, both captains write the name of one of their 12 players on a piece of paper and put it in a sealed envelope.
mm,
The reason for that is that should there be an injury and one of the opposition players can't play in singles event on Sunday, the name of that player pre-selected, so it's predating any form that they've demonstrated over the
mm,
3 days,
mm,
the name of that player will sit out the singles, and they will then share the point with a half a point to
mm.
each team.
Yep.
Hasn't been used in a long time. It has been used a couple of times previously.
Yep.
Hasn't been used for 20 something years. It obviously was with Victor Hovland getting a neck injury
Mm,
during day two, not able to play in the singles on the final day, and Harris English then being the player that had been pre-selected to sit that out, and they shared the half point. Now, it was going to be a moot point up until the fact that the US team mounted an inspirational comeback in the singles matches. And, therefore the commentary that's gone around it is should Victor have gotten half a point for being injured, should he have forfeited his point and that gone to Harris English or whoever else was being lined up against him in singles?
Mm,
Um, should the envelope rule exist? And if that point had gone to the US before play started that day, and then they started mounting that comeback and the pressure that was being applied onto the Europeans, would there have been a different result? So
mm.
huge amount to unpack in that.
Yeah, yeah, and I understand the sportsmanship part of it. It's a very sportsman-like gesture. However, in my opinion, if you can't play, you forfeit your match. That to me is in any other form of competition that you have. If in a tennis draw, if you get injured and you can't play, you forfeit your match, and the opposition player goes on to the next round. It just yeah. If you're say playing cricket and you get injured and you can't bat, you don't go, oh yeah, we'll give you X amount of runs, or we'll tie the
Correct.
match,
Correct.
or it's now a draw because you've got a bloke who's injured and can't play,
Mm.
right? Um, if you're injured and you can't show up, you forfeit the match. Now that obviously then brings in, should there be a substitute, and what form that potentially should or could take. But yeah, certainly, yeah, no play, no point.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I mean, I agree. Philosophically, I agree with that take. I don't think you should get a point for pulling out. And the other thing, when you look at unintended consequences on stuff like this too, is that if you have a bit of a niggly injury and you're not 100%,
Mm,
and you go, I can pull out before the start of play and guarantee a half point, or I can try and guts it out. And if I
yep.
have to withdraw, if I've started my
Mm,
round and I'll
mm,
withdraw, then I concede the point,
yep.
the full point. I don't get to halve it once the round
Mm,
started.
mm.
So it's almost a rule that makes me go, oh, if I'm not 100%, I won't play.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a good thing for the spirit of the game.
Yep.
But there's that point. The other one that I would make, which is on the opposite side of the coin, though, is, and I can see where this started from, in the beginning with the two captains standing there going, I don't want to win a Ryder Cup because you've not been able to take the field. I want to win
Yep.
it by beating you on the field.
Mm.
So I don't want to take the point just because you can't front up. We'll just share that one and move on, and then we'll decide the whole thing by the matches that get played, not by the
Yep.
matches that don't play. I can
Yep.
understand, and I think that's where it stemmed from. But is it a rule that's fit for purpose in modern day sport? I don't think so. And with the amount of pressure that's on, a half point is, you're gaining a half a point, like it's a
Mm.
big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I don't necessarily think that that's the way that it should go. We've talked about some other potential solutions to this. Do you forfeit the point? That's obviously the obvious one, but another one is, should each team carry an alternate or a reserve player, a 13th
Mm.
man, if you
Yep.
like, that in
Yep.
the event of injury, you could slot that in. Now, the problem with that is that's fraught with abuse that, in the first 2 days, player A is performing really badly and he's grotesquely out of form. And the captain says, well, you're injured. I'm going to sub in old mate for the singles on day
Mm.
3. So there'd have to be independent doctor
But that,
assessments.
that
But
surely there's the same, yeah, it's the same issue both ways, right?
yeah, it is.
Is
It
that,
is. It is.
because you're talking about, using the current rule to your advantage. Well, potentially you could,
I
whatever
know. I
rule
know.
you put in place,
Yeah.
there's potentially an avenue to exploit that rule. And it doesn't matter how many rules you put in place, there's always people are going to find a way to exploit rules if they want to.
Yeah. And that's where the rule I like is that if you can't play, the captain steps in, takes your place.
Hmm. But again, that rule can be exploited as well. Like, because if and you look at, in that case, then Keegan Bradley probably was then the right choice to choose as captain.
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
US team because
Yeah.
he's in form. So then that can be exploited in the same way that the sub can,
Of
in
course,
that,
every rule can
you
be
know,
exploited.
yeah,
I just could imagine the drama and the theatre of the moment. Like if
yeah,
on the
yeah,
first tee up steps Luke Donald and sees it through to win the point, like that would be next level. It's not going to happen, but anyway, it's a bit of a fun
yeah,
one to
yeah,
talk about.
yeah,
But I do. I mean, I think fundamentally, getting a half a point for not showing up,
yeah. I
don't.
have issues with it.
I don't like it. Don't
Yeah.
like it. At the same time, it would not have made a difference to the overall outcome. I don't think.
No, no. I
I
don't think
think that.
so. But also whether, and depending on whereabouts Victor Hovland played in the singles match, if he had lost it, the singles match, then would that half a point less have impacted the players at the back end of the field and put more pressure on them? And they're all
It's possible.
hypotheticals. Like
It's
you
possible.
don't know.
It's
Um,
possible. I mean, what it potentially would have done is it would have mixed up the matchings of the pairings.
mm,
And so any number of those results might have been different.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it could have been in either direction. So that we
Mm,
will never know. I am happy that it wasn't decided by half a point,
mm,
and that half a point being, the one that Victor got for not playing. I'm happy that we saw that it was decided by 2 points, and therefore,
yeah,
it was potentially less of an impact. But at the same time, yeah, I feel like we agree that's a rule that needs to be looked at.
yeah.
However, just one thing that I would say is it's not okay, I think, to our point before about Rory bleating about the abuse that he copped whilst he was throwing abuse around himself. I think it's not okay for Keegan to come out now and complain about the rule when it's a rule that he actually agreed to before
Yeah,
the event started
yeah,
because he wrote that name down in an
yeah,
envelope knowing full well that it could be used.
yeah,
So, you can't have it both ways. Either
mm,
have that argument before the event starts
yeah,
or don't whinge about it afterwards
yeah,
because you went into the event knowing what the rules were.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that, 100%.
So that's my last comment on that matter.
Mm,
Yeah. So that's a pretty good rundown of the event, Andy Walker. Were
mm.
there any other items that you wanted to throw in there that
Y- Yeah,
we
I've got a couple of things, and it's mainly sort of just analyzing a couple of individual behaviors within within the event. A the Justin Rose, Bryson DeChambeau
Oh yeah.
incident where the Bryson's caddy seemed to not understand the fact that Justin Rose was putting
Yeah.
and was doing his thing and doing. And I know they go through a process, and he was probably in his own little world and didn't realize what he
Doubt
was
it.
doing.
That to me smacks of
Um,
gamesmanship in match play, if you ask me.
I benefit the doubt. Okay, I'm trying to
No,
give them the benefit of the doubt.
no,
And then
no.
Justin Rose is basically, in a way that was pretty forthright, told him to back off.
Yeah.
Right? Your thoughts on that incident?
I think that's match play golf. I loved it.
Mm,
I have no
yeah,
problem with it at all. But I do
yeah,
think it probably needs to just get left on the green and not
mm,
carried over
yeah.
with any more
And I think
angst.
it was. I think they sorted it out on the 16th tee, but there was a fair bit of conversation going on after it. I mean, the fact that Rose sunk the putt and then DeChambeau sunk the putt on top of him, I thought that
Yeah,
was brilliant,
it's great.
right? And then they sort of carried it on with a bit of verbal back and forth off the green and up to the 16th tee, but then. Apparently, it all got sort of sorted out, and they had a conversation about it, and it was all sort of forgotten about. Um, but yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting dynamic between the two, and just showed the tension that was there at that point in time.
And but as there should be, the game's on the line. I think, in my opinion, there is no world in which Bryson's caddy did not know exactly what he was doing. Okay, like it's just not even up for discussion. Of course, he knew it was deliberate, and it was it's treading around the edges of what's okay and what's not. But
Mm,
that's how you do that in match play.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
of course, that's what was going on.
mm,
Rosie knew
mm,
that, and and Rosie called it, and
yeah,
also that's totally fine. That's not without risk as well, because that raises your own blood pressure and heart rate and does all the things that you don't want to do when you're then going to stand
Mm.
over a putt. So
Yeah.
it's not without risk for him to call that out, but he did that and he made the putt. That's great. Bryson made the putt. That's also great. It's a really good moment of tension and a bit of a flashpoint in a match play round.
Mm. Mm.
100%. But you cannot sit there and go, oh, gee, that was an accident. I'm really sorry. Because
Mm.
if it
Yeah.
was, you knew
Yeah.
what you were doing. You got called out. You all dealt with it. You moved on with your lives, and that's match play golf. So
Yeah.
yeah, happy with that.
Okay. Second thing, I saw on day two when Justin Thomas was trying to calm the crowd down when they were yelling at abuse at Rory and Shane Lowry, and there was a bit of commentary afterwards on the telecast that asking the question whether the fact that Justin Thomas was focused on calming the crowd down rather than focusing in his own game, whether that actually took away from his performance.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think so. And in fact, I think was not in his head, which may come as a surprise. But I actually read into that the crowd behaviour was over the line and was therefore making him as a person feel awkward and probably affecting his ability to focus on his own game. And he therefore felt the need to bring it back into a realm of reasonableness where he could then
Mm.
focus on his golf.
Yep.
A little bit like you talked about the Minjee Lee incident when you were standing in the crowd at the Australian Open. If you were on the green putting at that time, playing against Minjee, um, now that's an alternate universe in and of itself. But let's just say that you were there and you were hearing those remarks getting leveled at Minjee. I would imagine that would be quite a distraction for you mentally to be able to then focus on your own game because you'd be quite offended and upset by
Mm.
what you're hearing.
Mm. Yep.
And a natural reaction at that point would be to go, all right, everyone just calm down. That's not okay. Let's focus on the
Yep.
golf and bring it back to a
Mm.
level where we can all
Mm.
focus on what we're doing. So
Yep.
I don't think that this was a case of JT, losing the bottle for the fight or anything like that he may have been accused of. I actually think this was a case of JT going, no, 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 this is not okay. We don't behave like this at golf tournaments.
Mm.
Let's all bring it back. Enable me to focus, enable Rory to focus, sure, cheer and all those things, but don't level abuse. And I think that's what he was doing, was actually just trying to go, this is not helping anybody right now, the way that you're
Mm.
carrying on.
Yep. 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 Third point, and a bit of a credit here to Scotty Scheffler. I saw at the end of day two when he at that stage was 4-0 or 0-4, walked past the Europeans, and most of the Europeans were just in a huddle, sort of talking and cheering, sort of between themselves. And he went up and he shook every single one of the European players' hands and then stopped and had a conversation with Francesco Molinari, and may have been about the Justin Rose Bryson DeChambeau incident because he was in the group as well. Um, but full credit to Scotty Scheffler in that, yeah, he must have been feeling super disappointed at that stage, but still had the sportsmanship to go and shake every single one of his opposition players' hands. I think, as much as people have given Scotty Scheffler a hard time, I think that shows an enormous amount of sportsmanship.
And I'm not surprised. I mean, like, I don't get the criticism that gets leveled at Scotty.
Mm.
Like, I really don't. The guy's a class act. He's an incredible golfer. He is one of the only, global elite sports people that seems to truly understand this concept of where sport fits into his life and his identity. We talked about this in previous episodes. With the comments that he had made post tournament and press conference. And I think this is more of that. Like, yes, he's disappointed about the results that he's got on the golf course, but it does not impact who he is as a person. It does not change the way he goes about living his life. It does not
Mm.
change the way that he treats other people. And so for him, he could have he could have been 4-0. He could have won all of his matches, and I think he still would have walked over there and congratulated the Europeans on the performances that they'd had to that point. The fact that he lost all of his matches would not change the way that he would interact in that situation. So I think that's credit to who he is as a person, and I'm not at all surprised to see it. I think he's an absolute class act.
Mm. Yep. Yep. Agree with that. Agree with that. Last point, and this is, I'd like to get your view on what you would have done in this position. I right at the end, the very last putt to drop was Colin Morikawa, and he had a 3 foot putt to tie the match with Tyrrell Hatton. And I go back, and it was all over. Europe had won. And I go back to, I think it was about 1970, where Jack Nicklaus and Tony Jacklin were playing, and Tony Jacklin had about a 2 or 3 foot putt to halve the hole on the 18th with Jack Nicklaus, and the US. It had actually been, they'd retained the cup. It was 14 all, and Jack Nicklaus gave Tony Jacklin and said, "I'm not going to make you I'm not going to make you putt that. Let's have a half. Match is all tied. We're 14 all. We retain the cup." But and that's been lauded over time as a great moment of sportsmanship. Should Tyrrell Hatton have given Colin Morikawa? Now, Colin Morikawa made the 3 4-footer anyway to tie the match, but it was all over. Europe had won. Match was tied. Should Tyrrell Hatton have given Colin Morikawa that 3 4-foot putt?
100%, no question.
Yeah, that was
Absolutely no
my
question.
first reaction. I was really disappointed that he made. Now I'm a massive fan of Tyrrell Hatton. He's come a long way in my book in recent times, but I saw that and I just went, yeah. I think in the true spirit of sportsmanship, that should have been given. We pick up, match all tied, well done. Let's go.
Oh, I was watching it live, and I saw where both of the balls had finished up, and immediately in my mind it was, well, good, pick them up, and it's halved. I couldn't believe it. Like, obviously Tyrrell's was 2 inches from the hole, so he picked that
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
I couldn't believe it when I saw Colin lining the putt up
yeah,
and stepping
yeah,
over and
and
thought,
and Hatton
what
made
on
him
earth
putt
is
it.
going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad he made it,
Mm.
because if he'd missed it to lose,
Yeah.
that just would have been
Yeah, and it
not
really
not
meant
not a good way
nothing.
to finish. Yeah,
Like it was half a point in a match that was already over.
yeah.
I was a bit disappointed by it. As much as I think Europe performed and behaved incredibly well throughout the week, that to me was just a little bit of a negative on Europe in that those dying moments of the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, definitely unnecessary. But anyway, it is what it is. You see that
Yeah.
happen plenty of times. But I think, yeah, he may just have not really been thinking too clearly at that point
Mm.
with all the emotion that was going on. So
Yeah,
I'm not going to
potentially.
give the guy
Potentially.
excuses, but
Mm.
I think if he had his time over again, he'd probably go, yeah, that probably was unnecessary.
Yep. I agree.
But nevertheless, look, what a fantastic event, a great weekend of golf. You know, we've obviously talked about some of the negatives and some of the behaviors and some of those sorts of things, but I think it also helps to make it memorable. At the end of
Mm.
the day, nobody got hurt, so that's a good thing.
Yep.
And it's definitely given the likes of us a lot to talk about after the event. So
100%. 100%. I
there's nothing
also
wrong with
think
that.
that events like the Ryder Cup and the President's Cup, I think they bring a lot to the game of golf. And I think that the authorities, the governing bodies need to get their heads together. It's not what we want to see every week, but I think that those events can be, they can put those on the cards, and not necessarily the Ryder Cup or the President's Cup, but potentially like, and I know you've mentioned it, an international team versus Europe.
Oh, it has to happen. It just has to happen. I can't
Like,
believe that doesn't get played.
yeah, those sorts of passionate, events where it's match play, it's you against,
Mm,
another player. I mean, in amateur golf, it's very commonplace, and certainly here in Australia, there's at club level,
mm,
there's the pennants competition where it's exactly the same. Where there's seven players, you go out and you play match play against your
mm.
opponent. I love that form of the game, and I would love to see that
Yeah, I agree.
played more often, that format played more often in the professional game.
I agree. I think that the internationals v Europe just has to happen.
Mm.
And if anyone is out there that's in a position to make it happen, I will go so far as to say that I'm prepared to put our name on this and call it the Missing Links Cup. I I have no problem
Excellent.
with doing that.
Excellent. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to do that, and we'd be
Yeah.
happy. We'd be more than happy to, come along and MC
Be
and
be be patrons.
and host the event. There's,
Yeah.
count us in.
Yeah.
But all jokes
Yeah.
aside, I think it would just be a fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So we've
event.
called it early. I think we're probably the first show to call this
Mm,
internationals versus Europe.
yeah,
Let's get that
yeah,
on the cards.
yeah. The Missing Links Cup. Get behind it,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen. Talk to your local PGA, whoever makes the rules on this one. Just talk to
Mm.
them, whoever it is.
Yep. Yep.
International
Yep.
Golf Association, whoever they are. Anyway, digressing. Anything else that you want to share about the event before we wrap up, Andy Walker?
No, I think that's pretty good coverage of what happened. And again, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about actual golf, but yeah, there's certainly a lot that came out of it
Let's
outside
talk about.
of the actual strokes that were played.
Yep. Now, just by way of wrapping up, my last question for you, and you may have seen some footage on social media about the Europeans' reactions to the win. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the fun that they had on the plane. I've heard rumours that there was a €263,000 bar bill that they racked up on the evening after the event. Um, but I mean, what advice would you give them on how to celebrate a win like that, Andy Walker?
Oh, look, I mean, I get the 263 grand bar bill. I mean, you've got to celebrate in style, and certainly in a big event like that, I think
You do.
that that's yeah, that's something they've earned. That's something that I think needs to be respected. That you celebrate your performance, but I do question. I think they've left something out
Mm,
that's really important, and I think they need to bring it back to their core. They need to bring it back to that feeling that they get deep inside when you just know you've achieved something great.
how should they do that?
Rock out, Pilgrims.